Hey, I've been meaning to ask you a question. Why are you the front person for this show? Like, why is it called Courtney Fact and not some pun on my name?
Well, Shane, I can't help it. Is it because the ABC doesn't have enough drag queens hosting shows?
Are you a quota girl?
Why can't I be both?
Different and the best person for the job. We know that we still have a long way to go when it comes to seeing all kinds of diversity on our television screens, or politics or business.
Yeah, but if there's a quota, isn't there a risk you're just getting a job you don't deserve?
Well, quotas force people to think differently about who they're hiring. It doesn't mean they have to employ idiots.
I mean, I just don't understand why that's necessary.
People get hired for their skills. Maybe some people just need to work harder. Well, people don't just get hired for their skills. There are a whole bunch of reasons one person gets hired over another, including something called unconscious bias. Research does show that the person who gets the job isn't always the most qualified. Or, in this case, it could just be that I look better in a dress.
That is a lie.
Well, then if diversity is a problem, the quotas fix it. Yes and no. They are good ways to boost representation quickly, but opinions are split on how effective they are in changing people's minds when it comes to diversity. They can be a bit of a band-aid. These are the Courtney Facts. Let's take politics as our case study. Our two major political parties agree that there's traditionally been an oversupply of penises in the parliament. Even now, parliament is only 38% female, which is the best it's ever been. Sure, but it's a long way from being truly representative of our community, and the major parties are at odds about the best way to fix it. The Labor Party has gender quotas in efforts to boost women in their ranks, but the Liberal Party doesn't, saying that they prefer targets.
Right, because as I said before, who wants to get a job they don't deserve?
Yeah, and that's the argument made by many in the Liberal Party.
Look, I don't think there's a woman in the Liberal Party who wants to be considered a number, to be making up the numbers, to be a quota girl. We certainly see plenty of them in the Labor Party.
Which is also a good illustration of the stigma some associate with quotas. But the facts are that Labor are substantially closer to gender parity.
It's a fascinating story, diversity becoming a thing in Australian politics. So I remember myself, the election of the Hawke government in 1983, an extremely progressive government. There was only one woman in cabinet, Senator Susan Ryan.
Meet Chris Wallace, an associate professor at the ANU, and she's part of the 50/50 Foundation, which is an advocacy group trying to improve representation of women in leadership roles. She also used to be a journalist in Canberra.
So I watched directly the women of the Labor Party try and figure out how to get a fair share of power within the Labor Party.
Senator Susan Ryan, the first Labor woman cabinet minister, told delegates the ALP reaped the benefits of taking women seriously, saying it was the votes of women which had swept the party to victory.
They tried it for such a long time without quotas. They only got millimetric improvements despite a lot of goodwill around the place. So in the end, the Labor Party as a whole, men and women, agreed to a quota policy.
In 1994, they brought in a rule that 35% of winnable seats had to be contested by women by 2002. This was then replaced by another quota system in 2012.
So this is the thing, there's been this incredible real-time experiment in how to achieve diversity, actually how to make Parliament more representative in this way.
And when you look at the numbers now, Labor has almost 50% women in the lower house, which is a stark contrast to the other side. Countries with some kind of quota system do have more gender equality, like New Zealand, Nicaragua, and Bolivia, and have significantly improved over time. But you haven't explained why. Surely if there was a woman who came along who applied for the job, they'd have just as much chance as any man of securing it. Let me introduce you to someone.
When you introduce something like a quota or any kind of affirmative action policies, research have shown that, when you have these kind of interventions such as quotas, it actually increases the number of women who apply, including those who are actually good.
This is Edwin Ip. He's been researching quotas and their impact on gender equality.
What we often see is people's opinions are very split. So you roughly have half the people who hate it and half the people who very much support it.
He did this experiment where he asked two groups of people to evaluate computer programmers. He gave them a bunch of CVs so that they knew their names and their gender, but here was the catch. The candidates all had a skills test and only one hiring group was given access to the results.
The employers who were given the aptitude information alongside the CV, so everything's exactly the same, they just got an extra piece of information.
So what happened? The group without the skills test results were more likely to pick men, and the others were more likely to pick the best qualified.
We do have this kind of, unconscious bias within us, and that's one of the reasons why, because people take heuristics, they take shortcuts in the decision making.
That's pretty outrageous.
It's a natural human tendency, actually, and it's something that researchers from Harvard University call the hidden bias of good people, and that does lead to bias in the way that we view the world and make decisions.
Dr. Catherine Evans wrote a book about unconscious bias and economics in Australia.
So I set out to understand the barriers to women in senior leadership in Australian corporations. It's a very complex area, but fundamentally it boiled down to unconscious bias.
We're human beings, not robots. Unconscious bias, as well as outright discrimination and systemic forms of oppression. What? These are real things and they impact who we're hiring and firing.
There's definitely that argument that people should be hired, developed, promoted on merit. And I don't disagree with that. That is absolutely the case. But that assumes that merit is not, the assessment of merit is not biased.
So, according to Edwin, quotas can be a way of forcing hirers to expand their search.
Actually, if you don't implement a quota, you are less likely to hire the best candidates who could be women because you don't actually, see them. So basically, when women face disadvantages, using quotas can actually increase the chance that the best person gets hired.
We were talking about politics earlier, but as you climb up the ladder in different industries, diversity typically tends to decrease. Oh wait, I read about this. Wasn't there a study out of Harvard that said there were more CEOs named John than there were CEOs who were women? Yeah, that was the kind of famous one. So quotas are being used in business too, in some places. In Norway, they introduced a rule in 2008 where at least 40% of corporate boards had to be women. And lots of studies show that more diversity leads to better business.
There's a wealth of research that demonstrates the financial advantages and other advantages of businesses having gender equality in particular. It enables businesses to make better decisions 87% of the time and get 60% better results.
But as you've illustrated, Shane, not everybody thinks quotas are the way to go. Dr. Akshaya Kamalnath is writing a book about diversity in the corporate world.
So there's actually two types of people who might oppose quotas. The first category may just be people who say, look, quotas are anti-merit. They don't allow the best people to get the job. And in a sense, they may be saying that, maybe these people that we're trying to get up here don't actually deserve to be there. They would have got here if they were meritorious in the first place.
She says this perspective doesn't address the unconscious bias in the workplace.
So I fall in the second category of people who don't like quotas because I just see it as a regulatory tool that's too blunt. And it's kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit.
She says that quotas for gender can actually lead to a concentration of the same type of women in leadership positions, which doesn't much contribute to diversity overall. Remember also Norway that had 40% of women on the corporate board? Well, the rush to fulfill this requirement led to the same women being appointed to multiple boards.
If you're trying to address the problem of, unconscious bias, preventing meritorious people from losing out on opportunities because of who they are, I think you've not solved it because you've just given the same few people more opportunities and maybe you've overburdened them actually.
And then there's that stigma we mentioned, which can exist even if the person is extremely qualified for the position.
You found a very meritorious woman candidate or a non-white candidate, but there's a perception that this person is a quota appointment and so must not deserve this spot. I think the argument that has been put forth for gender diversity to sell it to business has been that, hey, this is good for business. But in effect, because like I said, the women that get appointed belong to the same networks, they don't really come with different perspectives. You need to come from different backgrounds to have different perspectives.
Well, that kind of brings us back to the issue we started with, which was lack of diversity in the first place.
Other types of diversity is so important because companies are simply not looking at it because they think there's no appetite for it. The appetite seems to be on gender.
So we're talking about things like racial diversity, socioeconomic background, culture, religion, disability. Yeah, for example, the Australian Human Rights Commission says that 1 in 5 people with a disability have experienced workplace discrimination. And almost half of those people avoided work because of the discrimination they faced. This includes being directly denied employment and employers not providing reasonable adjustments to give people a safe and productive workplace.
Haven't gone beyond talking about what physical accommodations you can make for disabled people. We haven't gone to the next step of saying that, actually they can have a lot of insights that we are missing.
Most researchers and advocates, fans of quotas or not, say that quotas alone aren't going to solve a lack of representation.
The kinds of things that we need to fix are, yes, discrimination, but we've also got to stop some of the structural barriers to getting a job, because we talk about it often as though we're the problem. So us as disabled people with our wonky bodies and all our brains and all of that stuff, that we're the problem, when actually it is the structural issues.
So our institutions need to address people's barriers to employment and promotion, and do this with those being disadvantaged, which is recognised by some, like Senator Holly Hughes, who says that things do need to change.
But I do think there's things that we can look at. The Liberal Party does need to modernise in some ways if it's going to start looking more attractive to women to get involved. Our Women's Council New South Wales meets at 10 or 11 o'clock on a Wednesday. Corporate women aren't going to attend those sorts of events.
I am of that generation of Labor women. Joan Kerner was the huge figure in this, who campaigned for an affirmative action rule. For a long period of time, I've been advocating that the Conservative side of politics take a similar step. And if they did, then we would have a parliament that was around half men, half women.
At the end of the day, more diversity means more representation, which means better outcomes for everyone. But how to fix this is nuanced. There's no simple answer. We need to be more mindful of the choices we make, which requires battling that unconscious bias. So we're in agreement then.